I was looking for a pulpit, and everything to... There you go. Exactly. Well, good morning to everybody. It's a hard job to say in a few words what a lifetime has been. I was asked to share some things maybe that I've learned over the years that the Lord has taught me, taught us. So let me just dive in. The first thing that I wanted to share with you today is I think you all are doing a pretty good job at this. I think we started reunions in 1967, and we've had some, over the years. And I want to challenge you to leave a legacy, a godly legacy of things that God has done in your life for yourself. A legacy, a history of things. It doesn't have to be in a book form. It can be jots and tittles of here and there. Things, but things where God has shown up in your life and impact you in a very special way. That's for yourself, because there are times in your life where you're going to get down. You're going to be in a valley. You're going to be in trials or testings of various sorts. It could be in the form of poor health, or it could be in the form of losing a job and not being able to find some. There's a myriad of things that happen that I think we need to have markers along the way that we can look back on personally and say, here's where God met me. He did this or he did that for me personally. But I think we also need to have that history so that there might be a legacy left to those who are looking after us. Whether it's your children, your grandchildren, brothers, sisters, whoever, we think that they know our history, but they don't. Believe me, they don't. And so you need to leave a godly legacy behind where God showed up in a big way or a small way. Sometimes just little things. Like I remember our son Mike losing a wristwatch that I had valued somewhat, and I gave it to him, and he lost it playing at school. Just a little guy, and he lost it. And I remember how we prayed that God would help him to find that watch if it was going to help his prayer life. And the next morning when we showed up at school, the night watchman handed him the watch. And you can imagine the excitement that he had. But little things, but also big things. Things where it was impossible for you to accomplish something, and then God intervened for you. And I'm sure you can find those things. This is a biblical thing, because 1 Samuel, after they had attacked the Philistines in 1 Samuel chapter 7, Samuel erected a large stone, and he called it Ebenezer. The Lord helped us through that victory. So we want to be able to look back upon those things where we would not forget God's grace, and those memorial stones where God gets the glory. But those are important for us personally, but also for those who are looking on. I could go to other examples in Genesis 28, where Jacob set up a pillar in Bethel, and he said that God had met him there, and he went back later in life, back to Bethel, in order to refresh his memory of what God had done for him. There's also an example in Joshua chapter 4, where the priests pulled out one stone out of every tribe, set it up in Gilgal, and that became a memorial for them to look back upon many times later of how God had met them. So God is the God of the mountain, but He's also the God of the valley. And we want you to think about when life is easy and you're up on the mountain and you've got peace of mind like you've never known, but things can change. And when you're down in the valley, don't lose faith, for you're never alone. You talk of faith when you're on the mountain, but talk comes easy when life is at its best. Now it's down in the valleys of trials and temptations. That's where your faith is really put to the test. He's God of the valleys. He's God of the mountains. That's a biblical concept. You can find it in 1 Kings 20, verse 28. The second idea that I wanted to present to you about how I think God has used different things in my life and maybe in yours is discover your unique way of communicating God's love to people around you. It may be to your family. It may be to others in your neighborhood and so on. Every place that we went as we served in the Caribbean, we tried new things. And I want to challenge you to try new things at whatever phase of life you're in, because you just don't know how God may use that. When we were in St. Vincent, we used crusades and home visits. When we went to Grenada, we went on television, and we had a television series, and then we had teas, afternoon teas, which was kind of fit in with the British idea of that country. And then when we went to Trinidad, we took Homes of Honor biblical series into the homes and tried to communicate God's love in that way. I'm still working on new ways. The other day, I encountered in my visitation, I encountered people who didn't want me to come and pray with them. They felt it was too private, I guess, for me to come and invade their privacy before they had surgery. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pray with them on the phone. They wouldn't answer the phone, so they left a voicemail, and I prayed on the voicemail. I found out later on that they had listened to it and appreciated it. So just whatever God lays on your heart, you find new ways to communicate His love. This week, our neighbor Paula, that has been communicating with Marlene quite a bit, Marlene said to her, you know, LaVern does these visits in hospitals and so on. Would you want him to come and pray with you? Now that was something new for her, and she considered it, and then on Wednesday morning, she said, well, yes, he could come to the house. So I went over there, and they have 2 dogs, and the dogs tried to get out, to attack me, and not really attack me, but, how they do. And so she shoved them back, and she came outside, and she held out her hands, and I communicated some scripture to her, and then I held her hands and prayed with her, which was something new to her. So try new things. Find out what it is that you can do well, that God could use as a special touch or a uniqueness to communicate His love to the world that has lost its moral moorings. 1 Corinthians 9:22 and 23 is a testimony of Paul in the Bible, and he said, I became all things to all men so that I might possibly save some. I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in His blessings. John is a friend of ours who we have befriended over the years. I think it was 2014. He had open heart surgery, And the staff at the church said, don't bother to go visit John. He's an old, hard army guy, and he won't respond to you. Well, I didn't listen to the staff. I went anyhow. I went over there to the hospital and prayed with John. I didn't think he was a believer. I was pretty sure he wasn't, but I prayed with him anyway, and kept up with him after the surgery. And for all of these years, we have communicated with John and Mary. And last May, he walked into my living room one night and committed his life to Christ. So it's not the big things, but it's the continuation of things. Finding new ways to do things, finding ways to communicate that will pay off in the long run. A third thing that I think about is learning to manage the stress of life. I had to learn this the hard way, and some of you probably have had to do that too. Stress does something to you that is hard to describe, because it can result in poor health, poor decision making, poor service to other people. You can actually lose your vision of helping people, and you can be put on the shelf, as it were. And it's hard. It's hard to go through those times. But I think of times where I went to the hospital because of stress. I thought I was having a heart attack. It was only stress. I remember times where I had to stay at home for several weeks, nursing poor health in my body because of stress. And so I want to challenge you this morning to think of where you are and try to manage the stress of your life. Because when you manage that, you can be good with other things in communicating the truth of God's love. That is number 3. Number 4 is look and invest in people that are faithful. By that I mean people that they are going to be there, and if they say they're going to be there, they will be there. Invest. We all of us should invest in somebody, and the discipleship ministry is not something that you need to have a formal sit down, study or whatever. It can be having coffee. It can be, doing things together, things that you enjoy. But you need to be able to invest your life into faithful people. If you give a job to somebody, and I learned this in the islands, these years that we spent in the islands, when you give a job to a person, if they're not faithful, they won't follow through. They won't follow through and do the job. So just giving them a job isn't going to make them faithful. And giving them more information is not going to help them. We have our churches full of people these days who think that if they can learn one more fact, one more something, that they will be better off. And that's not necessarily the case. Giving a person more information will not necessarily make them faithful. We need to invest in people who will take what you have to offer and take action on what that is to be said. I know a fellow at our church whose name is Fred. He's an Iranian, and but he's not faithful. I thought that he might be, because he was very energetic and we took him out to lunch and invested in some time with him, and then all of a sudden we discovered that Fred was no longer available. He was nowhere to be seen, to be found. So you have to find people who are faithful and invest in those people. And that will give you rewards, because we need to reinvent ourselves into other people. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2 says, "The things that you have heard of me among many witnesses, commit these things to faithful men," faithful people who will be able to teach others also. So you want to be able to pass on what you know, and know that that's going to take some action in the form of sharing with others as well. The fifth thing that I had to say, and there's only two more, by the way, contentment with where God has you. I don't know where God has you right now, but it's a contentment sometimes is attached to money. Not always, but sometimes. It is a lack of money that sometimes we think, well, if we just had a little bit more, we would, be really settled and happy. I remember a time in my life where I wanted $100 more in my paycheck. I said, if I had $100 more, then I could really sail. I could really be good. Well, I got the $100, but I still wanted more. Contentment, a lack of contentment, is sometimes a lack of contentment with God as to where God has you. I don't know where God has you, but it's also attached to thanksgiving, gratitude, a life of gratitude. To be content with where God has you right now, the scripture says, godliness with contentment is great gain. So, if you are content today with a godly life, you have a great life. You've had great gain. We discovered not too long ago 2 Corinthians 10:13 that says to work in the field where God has put you. That's a loose translation. That's my translation. Work in the field where God has put you. And if you are happy in your life where you are at the phase of your life right now, you will be happy with it when you grow older as well. Marlene and I have said many times in recent times, we're grateful for where God has us. She has the cancer. I have my own little issues with numbness in my hands. But we're grateful that we can reach out to people and we can see God help us, even though we can't do what we used to do. We go with shorter days, less energy, and we learn to sit down often in order to conserve energy. So, but we have opportunity to reach out to our neighbors with the limitations that we have and encourage others with a purpose. The final thing I wanted to say to you today is meet God every day in the Word. It is so important to stay in the Word, not just to learn new facts, not to be encouraged by, I read so many chapters today. In fact, I read the scripture today as not so much cognitive input as I do with motivation and application. What does God want me to do today from this passage of scripture? I need to learn to obey God better. And I need to put into practice that man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of God. So take your relationship with God daily, and you will, I think, find physical, mental, social, emotional, relational things will work out for themselves. When we don't interact daily with God in His Word and prayer, we're left to our own decision making. We're left to that often comes out to be brokenness as well. A selfish behavior reigns and fractured relationships surface. And we need to be able to sit down at the feet of Jesus and listen to what he has to say and worship him only. I would like to close with the little song, "The longer I serve him, the sweeter he grows." And we can join in singing if you'll